Good afternoon, everyone. I am Chanda Smith Baker. I am so pleased to be with you today as the board chair of the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather today, wherever we sit. I invite each of you in joining in reading the land acknowledgement statement provided on the screen. It is essential that we recognize and respect Indigenous people who have stewarded this land for generations. We have a practice at the Women's Foundation to acknowledge that and the stolen labor in this land. Now, as we embark on our time together, I want to share with you the mission and the vision that guide our work at the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. The Women's Foundation of Minnesota invests in ending systemic inequities and driving innovation for gender and racial justice. The vision is a world of opportunity where all women, girls, and gender-expansive people across intersecting identities and their families have the power to create and lead safe, prosperous lives. Together, let's reaffirm our commitment to this mission and vision as we continue our important work. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Bijuanin. Hi, hello, Nindijnikas, Jenna Ray. My name is Jenna Ray. I'm Métis Anishinaabe from the Turtle Mountain and Little Shell Nations. I use she, her pronouns. I'm joining you today from the piece of Dakota homeland known today as St. Paul. I'm really grateful to be here with our panelists and with all of you, igniting generosity and growing giving to women's and girls' causes. Now, Chanda, thank you. As you reminded us just a minute ago, this place that we call Minnesota has been home to Indigenous philanthropists since time immemorial. And the form of philanthropy that many of us practice and know today is a newer system, but Indigenous peoples have been giving and sharing here since time immemorial. And our communities have really long, proud traditions of holding cultures of care and kin-keeping that supported us all in wealth and abundance, particularly our women and our young ones. Now, I have the incredibly good fortune of leading community impact at GiveMN, where we work all year long to hold and foster a culture of care and abundance across Minnesota and beyond. And our organization was born from a very simple idea back in 2009. What if it was possible for giving and sharing to be easy, fun, and joyous, a celebration of the causes we love and the people who make their work possible? So to launch our new movement for generosity, we hosted a little event called Give to the Max Day. It was a 24-hour digital fundraising campaign ahead of its time, one that launched myriad giving days like it across the country and around the world. And since that day back in 2009, Give to the Max and GiveMN.org have brought together nearly 800,000 donors and more than 14,000 nonprofits and schools to generate more than $400 million of impact for our communities. And together they've shown us and remind us daily what's possible when we come together in belief of the future that we can build together for the place that we call home and the folks who share it with us. Now, the Women's Foundation of Minnesota was the first of its kind too, the first statewide women's foundation dedicated to gender equity in the United States. And our organizations share a spirit of generosity and abundance. We share a commitment to equity and inclusion, and we share a common purpose of catalyzing generosity to build a Minnesota where all of us can thrive. And that's why we've come together to launch the Feminist Giving Day here with all of you, the first statewide giving day dedicated and centering women, girls, and gender-expansive people. Now, what is an organization or a campaign but a collection of people working together towards shared vision and shared purpose? The people behind this campaign are mothers. We're aunties, we're sisters, we're friends, we're children, and we love the women, girls, and gender-expansive people in our lives with all of our hearts. And we know that only 2% of philanthropic dollars go to causes that center women and girls' causes now, and that's simply not enough for us to thrive. At the same time, we know that we can bring more donors and dollars together in support of gender and racial equity. And we believe with our whole being that this is the time and this is the place to launch a new movement for generosity and equity and inclusion. Now, you're all here with us today. Simply with your presence, you've joined that movement. I can tell you that I am, and we are so incredibly grateful for you. And we are thrilled beyond belief and are so ready to see what's possible when we come together to grow that 2% of giving that goes to women, girls, gender expansive people, and our families. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jenna and Yajong, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Grow the 2%. My name is Terri Thao, she, hers. I'm a program director of the Local Initiatives and Opportunities portfolio at the Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies. But I am really thrilled to be your moderator for today's session and to guide this awesome discussion with such esteemed guests. Now, on to meeting our speakers. Our first, which you heard from in the welcome, is Chanda Smith Baker, founder and CEO of Smith Baker, LLC. With over 25 years of experience at the intersection of philanthropy, business, and community, Chanda is nationally renowned for her leadership in advancing racial equity and social impact. Her interview style, rooted in curiosity and deep knowledge of community issues, has resonated both locally and nationally. Please join me in welcoming Chanda Smith Baker. Next is Nicole Matthews, who is the founding executive director of the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. An experienced trainer, facilitator, and organizer, Nicole has spent 30 years in the anti-violence movement. Her research on the trafficking of Native women in Minnesota has been instrumental in raising awareness on this critical issue. Please welcome Nicole Matthews. Our third speaker is J'Mag Karbeah, an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health and health services researcher dedicated to dismantling the impact of structural racism on maternal and child health. Through mixed methods and community-based participatory research, J'Mag aims to identify the complex ways racism affects health outcomes. And lastly, we have Henry Jiménez, president and CEO of Propel Nonprofits. Henry's dedication to advocating for and advancing communities is evident in his leadership at Propel, where he provides nonprofits access to capital and capacity building services. As a Bush Fellow and on the board of various organizations, including the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, Henry's impact extends far beyond Minnesota. Let's give a warm welcome to Henry Jiménez. So, as we thank all of our speakers, I did want to do a little housekeeping bit. If you do have questions, you'll see here we have the nifty Q&A button at the bottom of this Zoom. So please, as throughout the panel, as you hear from them, put your questions there, and I will have some of the amazing staff from the Women's Foundation sort them for me at the end when we do our formal Q&A. So having said that, let's get started. So Henry, as we talk about getting to the why behind the 2%, what's the impact on women, girls, and gender expansive people when only 2% of philanthropic investment supports causes who center us?
Yeah, well, the impact has been significant. It hinders economic growth. It hinders social justice efforts. It hinders pretty much in every sector of the work that nonprofit leaders in Minnesota and across our country have been doing because they're not receiving adequate resources. I also think about, can you imagine how much Minnesota nonprofits led by women leaders have done with just 2%? Like, it also tells me what a significant place to invest if you were a philanthropist or even any community member. If this is what Minnesota has been able to do with 2%, imagine what our community could do with 4, 6, 8%. So if you were to ask me, like, how much should we be doing? What if it was flipped and it was 98%? I mean, a lot of the problems would be solved. And so I would encourage our community here today to really be thinking about how they're investing, and let's increase that 2% to a significant higher number. Terri, if you don't mind, I would like to give a little bit of data here. You know, according to MCN's report in 2022, 70% of Minnesota's nonprofit employees were women. 74%. Right? I don't necessarily know how many of those were women-led or women-led boards, but 74% of nonprofit employees are women. It's clear to me that the decision-making historically hasn't been made by women, and you can see it by, again, the investment in women right now. So can you imagine if we started to invest a little bit more? The impact would be significant. And something more personal here at Propel, 70% of our loans that were made, or access to capital, were made to women last year. I'm really proud of the work that Kate Barr and the team here did to do that. But that took significant attention, internal attention, to say, hey, what are we doing? Because a lot of folks can say, look at our outcomes. Our outcomes are good. But are women centered in the decision-making process? Are they centered in the decision of new policies that would increase this type of outcomes? I think that's the question I give back to all of you. So it's significant. I would say we need to start investing significantly more. So
thank you. So as we talk about why now is the time to take action, Nicole, tell us a little bit about what's the impact of this funding imbalance on our personal safety, our children's safety, and the safety of our overall communities.
Thank you. And Buju and Dinoy Maganang. Good afternoon, relatives. So I think the impact is really significant. So this week I'm actually up on the Mille Lacs Reservation in Hinckley, and we're hosting our annual statewide conference on ending sexual violence in tribal communities. And so we have a room full of over 100, almost 150 advocates and others from around the state of Minnesota, and also Canada and Montana and the Dakotas and Arizona, and all across the nation, that are also here because we don't have we haven't had a solid investment in what it means to truly have safety in our communities. And so I think of, like, what is the impact? And I think, what would it look like if when we were injured, we weren't able to access a hospital? Because that's what I think we're sending, the message is, when we do not fully invest in programs that are invested in the safety and well-being of our women and girls. And so what would happen, right? We would have people that are not being cared for, people whose injuries are, that are not treated, right? And that's often what we see when we look at, sexual violence, gender-based violence. And so this morning we were talking about prevention, and one of the participants said something that was really striking to me. And she said, much like the African-American community tells their children and youth not to trust law enforcement because of the relationships between law enforcement and the community, I tell my kids not to trust social workers. And I was thinking about that, and thinking about, like, what would it look like if we were fully invested and really cared for people, where we had responses that kept people in their within their families and kept them safe, without people thinking the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to remove my kids, right? And how do we build those systems that have, responsive ways of, or trauma-informed ways of responding to our communities, and especially to our communities of color? And I thought it was really, it saddened me that we are fearful of responding to those systems, but it's also indicative of the fact that we don't have fully funded programs. Many of the people here are also community members because we don't have fully funded programs in our communities. We also have very high turnover in our programs because we don't have the funding to sustain our workforce, to sustain people long-term. So in advocacy, it's looked at as it's a stepping stone to your next journey in life, rather than this is the next journey in life, right? Caring for our women and girls and gender expansive people should be like, this should be where we're going. right? This should be something that we're invested in and that we care about. It should not be like, I'm going to do this for a little bit when I'm in college, and then I'm going to move on to these other great things I want to do in my life. Because what is greater than caring for our women and girls and our gender expansive people and those who are raising our children and caring for our communities and our families? So I think the impact is huge. And I think also we have done a lot with the little amounts that we've had, right? But just think of, exponentially how much greater it could be if we had more investment in our communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. J'Mag, tell us about the impact of this funding imbalance on health outcomes, both today and looking forward. Excuse me.
Yeah, definitely, Terri. In true academic form, I'll take a step back and kind of situate myself in this conversation. So as a population health researcher, the goal of my work is to inform policies that advance health equity for marginalized and minoritized populations. And in that work, I focus on discrimination both interpersonally and at this larger structural level, and thinking about how it impacts the lives of minoritized folks across the life course. So thinking infants, children, adults, and reproductive age individuals as well. And thinking about how funding plays into this larger structure, the goal of my work is to come up with policies that support the work that's already being done by the boots on the ground. So thinking about the philanthropic efforts that are already ongoing, how do I affirm the strength and impact of those organizations and those actions, but also how do I provide the information that's necessary to continue at a large policy level the programs that we know need to happen for minoritized people, especially women, girls, and gender expansive people. So thinking about how the health of this very broad population is impacted overall. So I joke that my work covers everything except aging. So that's a huge swath of our of life, right? But I focus on three main areas, and I think through these areas we can really see the need for more giving and the need for additional investment in women, girls, and gender expansive people. So first, my work on perinatal health. As folks might know, and as was shown in the Women's Foundation's report, we know that nationally, minoritized folks, especially Black birthing people, are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience pregnancy-related mortality or morbidity. And similar numbers, although research is limited, exist for Indigenous folks as well. We know that there is an urgent need to create safe, supportive, health promoting birthing spaces for women and gender diverse people, both nationally, but also in the state of Minnesota. And what that means now in terms of where giving is going, there's a need to support people who are already doing this work. And we are so fortunate in the state of Minnesota to have so many organizations that are deeply connected and deeply invested in improving outcomes for pregnant people, regardless of racial ethnic background, but especially for Black birthing people. And we know that if we don't invest in supporting birth outcomes, the tangible impact of that is that families are greatly impacted. So that means losing children, that means losing mothers, that means losing parents. And if we're not investing in what we know are effective solutions that already exist, we're really causing a large population level harm unintentionally. I also do a lot of work in the adolescent mental health space. Also love to see in the Women's Foundation's report some work coming out of the Minnesota Student Survey, which we know is this extremely valuable, extremely comprehensive analysis of the experiences of young people in our state. And it's no secret that over the last, hard to say, like 4 or 5 years, it's been really difficult for everybody. Mentally, nationally, there's just been a lot that we've had to come to terms with as individuals and as a country. And this is especially true for the young people in our state. And we know nationally that young people are experiencing dramatic mental health symptoms in response to our ever-changing world and the realities in which they live. And this is especially true for young people with minoritized identities. So we're talking youth of color, we're talking about gender diverse youth, we're talking about youth that are at these very unique intersections of being racially or ethnically minoritized and having diverse gender or sexual orientation identities. So what it means for now is that young people have this urgent need for support, and that looks fairly different for different groups of young people. But in the future, it means I love thinking about adolescence and adolescent health, because the investments we make in young people now, it sounds very cliche, but have dramatic impacts. We know that young people who have strong and supportive adults live in supportive communities and have strong connections turn into very effective, affirmed adults. And so the goal from a giving perspective is, how do we invest in young people now to create adults who are self-confident, happy, healthy, and well? And I know I'm taking up a lot of time, but lastly, in my work, also I work in the third sector, which is discrimination in healthcare broadly. So I'm a health services researcher. I'm interested in how people experience their healthcare system. And although a lot of my work focuses on these larger structural issues, we know that within the healthcare setting, there's a lot of harm that can be done unintentionally to folks. So speaking specifically about, again, our target population, right? Women and gender diverse individuals. My goal in my work is really interested in how do we create healthcare spaces, either through direct interventions within healthcare spaces or by supporting individuals who work in these spaces. So thinking about doulas, patient navigators, et cetera. So that, how do we support people doing the work to make sure that engaging with our healthcare system is not harmful? How do we support people doing work to make people with marginalized identities feel safe, recognized, and heard when seeking necessary healthcare services? We know that's not necessarily the case now. We know especially Black and minoritized individuals report high levels of discrimination or anticipatory stress related to discrimination in seeking healthcare. And it's, to me, a little preposterous that people are facing physical anxiety and harm by seeking health promoting services and engaging with our healthcare system. So from a giving perspective, thinking about how do we support the people who are trying to make this better, whether it's having a hand to hold when you enter a facility, or having a doula by your side, or having a midwife that is supporting your birth process, and thinking about both now in this moment where we know there's an urgent need, but in the future so that we can create a healthcare system that truly supports the need of all people. So thank you.
Thank you, J'Mag. Chanda, so moving to action, what can those of us gathered here today do to change this trend? What about us, the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, uniquely qualifies us to lead in this moment?
Yeah, I think, it's an important question. And I think a question that many people are asking is, as we're seeing the reversal of many of the things that J'Mag just mentioned in terms of policy, or the lack of investment in the areas that we know would be essential and critical to solving some of the gender inequities, I think part of what we can do is educate ourselves. So thank you to everyone who's in attendance today. And really paying attention. There's plenty of opportunity for global strategies, and then there is a real reason to have targeted strategies that we know work for different subsets of our community. And so the Women's Foundation of Minnesota focuses on women and girls and gender expansive people for a very specific reason, which is to address the issues that are most harmful to those demographics. And so I think part of what we can do is be intentional about our learning, our time, and our resources. And so for us to look at how do we increase spending, that's a very deliberate choice on where you invest your dollars. The amplification of issues, as we were speaking, we're watching public policy reverse itself on the rights of women across this nation. If we want that to be disrupted, right? It has been clear to us, I believe, that simply having a law be passed does not mean it will be sustained. And so I think by taking our eye off, and often where our resources are is where our attention goes. And so I think that if we can combine those things, and we really have intentionality on making sure that our future generations, our daughters, our granddaughters, have the opportunities that our grandmothers had even, right, that we're not reversing. We need to continue to be deliberate. And we know across many, many systems that there's adverse outcomes for women and girls and gender expansive people. So the Women's Foundation is certainly qualified and has spent years building trust, building understanding, building relationships and networks across this nation so that we can be in an important position to be able to be a voice more globally, nationally, and from the state on the issues that are impacting us. And so, this is why I'm investing my time, my resources at the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. I certainly invite others to take a look at the important work that we're doing to find ways to get plugged in and to join a community of people committed to tackling disparities with a very specific and targeted way of doing that, which is by focusing on women and girls.
Thanks, Chanda. So earlier we got some numbers about data, about where we are right now, the possibility of what's happening. Let's imagine, right? So what is possible when we grow the 2%, right? Some of you folks, some of you all shared some figures earlier, but what does it mean for you? Would love to hear from each of you to tell a story about what's impacted your careers and what drew you to pursue this within this impact area. And also, as we think about your personal story too, connecting it to what does it mean to fully live in the future where the investments are larger. So popcorn, Chanda? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll start. Since I already have the microphone, I'll keep going. And Terri, thank you so much for hosting us today on this conversation and on such an important time for us. As I was thinking about this, I have some real concrete examples of difference making that has occurred with me in this body, in this demographic that I represent. And I have told this story often of a time where I was just, getting handed, by a group of people. And I remember going into a mentor of mine, Tony Wagner, who was the president and CEO of Pillsbury United Communities, and I succeeded him. And I said, Tony, this is what's happening. And he said, is it because you're Black or you're young or a woman? And I said, yes. It's all of those things. And so I appreciated the fact that he understood that the way that I had to show up in leadership was distinctly different from him, but because people would react to me differently. And so the investments that people have made in my development and opportunities that allow me to better navigate those circumstances. I have ran programs and I can see the differences that are made in terms of funding, in terms of prioritization and languaging, and who gets access and who doesn't. I have had very clear opportunities to see how those disparities play out throughout my career, throughout my life. And I've seen it as a mother, right? In some of those years, I was a single mother, and we know the narratives that exist around that. And had it not been for the strength of community and many mentors, the road that I traveled would have been a lot heavier, a lot more challenging, and probably a lot more stops because of the obstacles that were placed in my way.
Thank you, Chanda. We're going to go reverse order from our speakers. J'Mag, any thoughts about the question that was asked about imagining the world and also your personal story?
Yeah, I think I will start with my personal story. I always think about how I got here and where I am, and I think about the privilege that it is to be a Black immigrant woman. So I was born in Liberia to Liberian parents who immigrated to Wisconsin in 1998. And my parents both come from healthcare backgrounds. My dad was a PA in Liberia. My mom was a midwife. And I think together those experiences really influenced how I saw the world. And once in Milwaukee, my parents became nurses, with my mom working in labor delivery. And so I always joke that I've always been interested in ladies and babies, and that's been my thing for a really long time. So really hearing these honestly beautiful stories about my mom's experience as a midwife and what it means to be with someone at such an important time, and both the positive outcomes, but also the sometimes unfortunate the unfortunate outcomes that can happen. I hope everyone can hear me a little bit better. Was that good? So thinking about birth and both the beauty of it, but also sometimes the sadness that's accompanied with it. I've always been deeply interested in birth and supporting birthing people and what that looks like and that connection. Growing up in Milwaukee, when I did, there was also a lot of conversation around birth, but in a really different way, right? We had these deeply racialized conversations around teen pregnancy and how do we stop the teen pregnancy rate? It's so bad. And it was, how do we stop Black girls from having babies? And at this time, my mom worked at a public hospital in Milwaukee, and therefore like lived the reality of these data, right? Like, knew firsthand who her patients were, the age of the patients, and would relay some of those stories to me. And it's with a deep sense of humility that I say I've grown so much since then, being influenced by those narratives and not realizing at the time how steeped in white supremacy they are, and steeped in inequity, and being told and forced down the idea that people were the problem without acknowledging the structural component. And it wasn't until much later, until I was in undergrad, that I really had this eye-opening experience that was, oh, these things exist because of the structures we've established. The structures we've established do not support people in ways that allow them to make truly, I don't want to say informed decisions, but like really have the bodily autonomy that is necessary for individuals to actualize reproductive justice, right? We don't have the educational systems, we don't have the economic systems, we don't have the criminal legal systems that really allow for bodily autonomy that is necessary for women, girls, and gender diverse people. And upon realizing that, it kind of became my mission. It's like, oh man, this whole thing I wanted to do for decades is really misguided, because it assumes that people are the problems that need to be fixed, rather than these deep structural inequities that we have, this deep imbalance, the lack of voices, the lack of representation. And especially when we think about folks with marginalized gender identities, or Black women, Black girls, et cetera. And so for me, it's always been ladies and babies. It's transformed into understanding that people are powerful, but our systems don't allow them to be. And so that's kind of the framing that guides a lot of my work. And thinking about this future, I work a lot and think a lot about reproductive justice as a framework and the central tenet of bodily autonomy. And I dream of everyone being able to actualize that right to bodily autonomy, but also understanding that that means a lot, that has ripple effects. When we think about bodily autonomy, that means economic freedom, that means freedom from oppression in all its forms. I think about Camara Jones, past president of the American Public Health Association, physician researcher, who brilliantly talked about the harms of racism, not just being in that it hurts people, but it saps our society of human potential. And in a world where we expand our 2% and we support women, girls, and gender expansive people, I think about all the growth that is possible when we invest in people fully and don't squander the potential that this population has to offer.
Thanks, J'Mag. Nicole, the same question to you.
Thank you. I was sitting here, yeah, just thinking, and I guess I'll start with my own personal story or journey into this work and what's possible. Like I too entered this space as a stepping stone. I'm going to do this for a little bit and then I will move on, and started, as an intern doing work in a domestic violence, sexual assault organization, and continued on and building, and then, found my way to the coalition and to be able to impact work broader and to work within my own community, and with the understanding and the history of my mom, growing up as a child and seeing my mom experience violence, having experienced violence myself, and also seeing how many of my relatives have also experienced violence, and wanting to do something to really change the communities and to change our communities and to look at balance and wellness and how we restore our traditional values that uplift our women and girls and gender expansive people, including all our two-spirit relatives, as sacred, right? And so how are we lifting those up? And, I always think about as we heal ourselves, we are also healing, our previous generation, right? Like our ancestors are feeling that impact. So I know that the work that I do, my mom is no longer on this earth, but I know she still sees it and it has impacted her in the spirit world. And I know my grandfather, who went to boarding school, is also feeling that impact of people are doing something to change what has happened to our communities, to the impact of colonization, and all the historical trauma that we are now working to change that for our communities. And it is by and large led by women and girls and gender expansive people, right? And so I look at that impact, and a story that I told recently. So, 21 years ago, when I was very new into the coalition side of work, into the tribal coalition side of work, and we were at the National Congress of American Indians and working with our tribal leadership, because in order to have an impact in our tribal communities, you also need to talk to our tribal leadership, right? Because they're sovereign nations. And I was pregnant at the time with my now 20-year-old, and working 16-hour days, making sure we networked and we educated, and also learned about the process at NCAI. And fast forward 20 years later, 21 years later, my now 20-year-old daughter, who is much smarter and much braver and more outspoken than her mom, has done her own work and traveling to talk about Black and Indigenous solidarity and what that looks like in our movement. And so to see the power when we're not only doing this work and for our ancestors behind us, but the power of modeling that also for our future generations who are watching us and who are finding their ways, and who, I look to. It's not like as a baby elder that I have all the answers, but I think that these young people have a lot of answers too. And I think they're also leading us in really incredible ways. And so I feel like what's possible when we grow the 2% is that those young people that are coming up behind us, and more people that are looking at, well, maybe I'll do this for a year or two. They're really invested, right? Like we are investing in that. We are investing in them to really take us to the next level, to really lead us in where we're going to, because ultimately I do this work because I'm trying to work myself out of a job, because I hope that my future generations to come aren't thinking about how to end gender-based violence, because it will already have ended. And that's really the ultimate goal. So I think when we really, truly invest in women and girls and gender expansive people, that is the ultimate potential for me. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you. And Henry, to close us out, your thoughts. You mentioned a little bit earlier about what's possible too, but what's your personal story drawing to that?
Well, Nicole, you touch my heart right now, and all of you. And so my personal story really starts with my grandmother and my mother. My grandmother is illiterate. She doesn't have any education. My mother has a 9th grade education. I could tell you that those two women are some of the smartest people I know. Yet their entire life they were told that they didn't know anything. Yet the impact that they've had on me is tremendous. The impact that I had from my mentor in college that led me to be a women's studies major, getting a degree in women's studies, she had an impact on starting to help me think of verbalizing what I was feeling about how I saw my mother and grandmother being treated and not knowing how to even communicate that. So I always thank her for that. But all of that has made me feel that I don't ever want my wife or my daughter or anybody coming to feel the same way that my mother and grandmother have been treated their entire life. I almost feel like it was never even fair for them the moment they were born. Nicole, you talked about generational trauma. I feel it. I feel it, you know. So that's what's inspired me. My work has always been about always thinking about how every action I do impacts not just myself, but really how does this impact my grandmother and my mother and other people around me. And so I might take a little bit longer to make decisions as an executive director, I could tell you, but I could tell you that I'm always asking for support. I'm nervous today because I don't want to be honest, to do or say the wrong thing after I was just supported by 6 or 7 women on my team yesterday to support me to be able to say the right things and not just say them, but like it actually was a perfect opportunity as a new CEO of Propel and say, I don't want to just say nice things about what Propel is doing, but I want to make sure that we're also genuinely have the policies in place where your voice is included in the decisions moving forward. And to me, that's what I would say moving forward to anybody. It's not just about giving more than a 2%. It's ingraining that every decision you make includes women at the decision-making process. And other people. And I want to also say something, Chanda brought this up, but it's not just women. I also have to remind folks that there's folks of color, there's other communities that are impacted. How are they also being impacted by how you are giving? And I think that if we could always center that, we obviously can have a bigger impact here, so.
Thank you very much, Henry. So to this, before we move to the Q&A, I know we touched a little bit the personal story and connecting about what's possible. What really would it feel like to live in the future where women and girls and gender expansive people and families are fully supportive? Just real quick, what would that look like?
Since I was already on, I'll take the mic here and then, but just to finish off, I just want to say, and again, this is not even my quote. This is Andrea, someone on our team that brought something up, and I was like, wow, Andrea, that touched me, and I'll say it. I'm not going to say it exactly the same, but she said that this world is already exhausting if it's not meant for us. So I would love for a world to not feel exhausting for anybody. It's exhausting to think about having a shift and wear different hats, and I feel that no matter in what community you live, I think women are always having to never feel fully comfortable. They're always exhausted and wearing multiple hats. And I would love a world where everybody feels not exhausted to live. It should be, and I think we can get to that world.
Thanks, Henry. Anybody else?
I mean, what I love about that and what I'm thinking about, Henry, is I'm like, exhausted. And then there's just like, it's one thing to just be tired, right? Like I'm tired, I had a long day, but exhaustion is a whole different, that's a whole different level of like, I'm exhausted of having to think about what I'm saying before it's said. I'm exhausted from having to figure out how to, figure out how to move in this particular space, because I know that if I move in another way, it may not be as accepted. Like the before and the after and the during, the contemplation of what does it just mean to show up in space because of the isms that we are navigating, because of the culture that is so set, that's not accepting to the diversity of who we are in this city, in this state, in this nation. I don't think that Unless you know, you don't know. And I think that if you want to be a good ally and a good accomplished, if you want to really move on these issues, it's just believing the stories that are told, right? And supporting the genius that exists, even if that genius looks different from yours. Trusting that people from community, women understand women's issues, and no, we're not a monolith, but I think that when you do your work and you sit in community and in relationship with people, not just the statistics, when you sit in relationship with community and you commit to the proximity, you know and understand issues better and more intimately. Even if it's not your experience, you can share a piece of that experience and find relatability in it. And so here's to, not being exhausted in the future, and creating more space and more energy for our young ones to come up without navigating the things that we have had to navigate. And that would be my dream, is that my granddaughter would not have to do that.
Thank you. Nicole or J'Mag, what would it look like to live in that future?
I think I love the points that both Henry and Chanda have made, and from that, really sitting with the idea of rest and thinking about Tricia Hersey, creator of the, I want to say the NAB Collective. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but the idea that rest is liberatory and rest is radical, and I think that's what that future feels like. It feels radical and it feels liberated to think about what this ultimate future of equal investment looks like and feels like.
I love that. I think you're talking about the NAP ministry. Is that what it is?
I got it as soon as I hit mute. Yes, the NAP ministry. Apologies.
Yes, I love that. I love them. I love that work. And it so resonates with me. I can pick a different card every day. And I think for me, like, what will it feel like? The first thing that came to mind was that women and girls and gender expansive people can be the matriarchs that we are intended to be in our homes, in our communities, that we will not have to fight of what is that rightful place for us in our communities, because it will already be. And I imagine how liberating and how freeing that will feel. And, I have to really be purposeful about seeing that and feeling that and knowing that, because I believe we can get to that world. And I believe that if we continue to invest, we will get to that world, that women and girls will be the matriarchs, that will take their rightful place in our communities, for Native women in our tribes and in our homes, and that we will center around our life givers and our girls and women and gender expansive. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the awesome panelists for their comments and sharing their stories, and also kind of dreaming about what's possible in the future. At this point, we're going to actually turn it over to you all in the audience. Please enter your questions into the Q&A button, and then we'll be having staff help sort through. But I do want to go ahead and say that there is a question currently now in the chat around the question about, can anyone speak to the delta or the difference that investment in girls and women, and also maybe marginalized, systemically disenfranchised people, begets with economic mobility at the family and micro level, family level, and macro level community? So it seems like there is an investment here uniquely outpaces standard ROI. However, I wonder if that is true. So a couple things packed here, right? Where investments are, what does it mean at those levels? Any one of our speakers want to take a initial kind of reflection or answer at this question?
I mean, I think I understand what the question is, and there is a lot packed into that question. So I will do my best to answer it. And I think that in some ways we have answered that question in the conversation, is that sometimes a global strategy of family works. But if you know how family works, you know that the mother sometimes has some unique challenges to the other people in the family. And I think that would hold true in the questions that you're asking here. Sometimes it's a collective. I think all of those things matter, but I do think that there's opportunity to have more specific and deliberate and targeted strategies that are aimed specifically at women, girls, and gender expansive women to address the issues that are unique to them, whether or not it's pay inequity, whether or not it's violence against women, whether or not it's the health disparities faced by women, including the studies that just more recently are starting to involve more women about women's issues. And so there is a number of things that I think would have the type of ROI and perhaps even have a higher result on the targeted strategies than the community or the family level. So I hope that I've answered that, Stephanie.
Can I just add to that, you know, for example, ESG is somewhat of a new way of investing in women-owned businesses, and just investing in women, period, in many ways is new. I mean, clearly you can look at the data, right? So there is, I don't have that information right now, and I'm hoping maybe some teams in the Women Foundation of Minnesota could provide that. But, you know, we're working with a women-owned investment firm that could probably provide a better answer to this, that would say why it actually is better to invest in women-owned businesses, women-owned entities. So just want to make sure I said that.
Let me ask the second question, a really good question about youth. Can you share ways you're making philanthropy and activism accessible to youth? So there's a lot of talk about for future generations, for descendants, but what's currently happening now?
I can certainly talk about the work that we have done on engaging with youth and including them. I think we turn to our youth often. So we do, you know, a lot of community organizing around missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And when we have marches, we always ask that our youth and our elders lead us. And they do, and with such grace and beauty, right? We always provide moments and times for them to share their voices, to lead us, to teach us, and to create spaces to also help them grow in their leadership, right? Because we want to also make sure that we bring them along with us, right? That we are helping them to grow and finding those ways for leadership.
At the Women's Foundation in Minnesota, we have the Young Women's Initiative. And so when you say youth, that could go from very young, but one of the ways that the foundation embeds the voice of different generations of women and girls is by that Young Women's Initiative. And I believe that has been going since 2016 with a really deliberate effort of including the diversity of what that means in our city, both geographically and ethnically.
Thank you. I'm going to sneak in the last question because I think it's really important. Someone asked about the 2%, going beyond the 2%. What sector has the biggest opportunity for growth? How would, you know, someone mentioned, the person asking mentioned women-centered economic organizations getting the least funding. Where does it show up? Where are these opportunities specifically if folks had just had thoughts about where it could go?
We are all sitting here thinking, I think. I mean, I think we also answered this question a little bit in terms of what Henry just stated in terms of investing in women-owned businesses. We know that when there is financial stability in women-headed households, it creates stability and opportunity for the children and their future generations. So I think the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, obviously, you know, as board chair, I would have to promote the opportunity to be in partnership there, to co-invest with us on strategies. We have a brilliant team of people that work on these issues every single day. And so for curiosity that extends beyond what we can address today, I invite you to join us on our website, join additional conversations that we're hosting, partner with us and co-invest in us as that team is doing great research to make sure that we're touching on the most pressing issues facing our company or our community. And then I think lastly to the youth question, I love that. And I think, and I know that I have personally benefited as a young person for things that were very specific to girls. And so I think that there's opportunity to be targeted in where your giving is, to increase, even if it's just 2% of your giving, to think, you know, if you give out X amount every year, could you increase that by 2% and just target it towards women's issues? And that could make a notable difference if we were all just to do that.
Excellent. So many of you saw we just popped up a chat here, a little poll here today asking about today's session. As we wrap up our discussion, we have a really exciting announcement that the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation has given the Women's Foundation a $30,000 match for Feminist Giving Day, right? So with this gift, I'm going to ask real quickly, you see here on your screen, right? And to Chanda's call to action about increase your 2%, I'm hearing that message, Chanda. I'm going to take that, right? So what I would really ask our guests real quick, who would be someone you would donate in honor of, right? As we think about the ancestors and the descendants, who would you honor?
I can hop in. I hope folks can hear me pretty well. I would honor young people, both from marginalized racial backgrounds, but also marginalized gender identities. Every time I'm in communities and people, I get so excited about the possibilities.
Nicole?
I can go. I would donate in honor of my mom, who, while she may have experienced violence, also taught me about what it means to be a matriarch, what it means to be a strong Native woman, and who really helped me to be who I am in this world. So I would donate in honor of her.
Thank you. Chanda and Henry?
Yeah, I would donate for my grandmother, for my mother, who is cleaning hotel rooms as we speak, for Mara, the janitor I just met that cleans this building that has the same story that my mother has. I would donate for women that remind me of my family.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, my grandmother, my mothers who are resting peacefully in heaven, to my granddaughter and future generations, and may I be the bridge that takes it a little bit further.
Well, on behalf of this amazing, amazing panel, let's give them and the audience, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much for speaking today, sharing your wisdom and your story with us, and envisioning the future with us. We always have this chance to dream and scheme out loud. You saw the poll pop up asking about what you thought of today's sessions. Please learn how to get more involved with our speakers. There is going to be a link today about getting connected even to all of us. In addition to that, there's also the Women's Foundation's website, WFMN, womensfoundationminnesota.org. Thank you, everybody. We hope you have a fabulous and wonderful afternoon, and thank you for taking the lovely noon hour here to join us as we celebrate Feminist Giving Day. Shinji Dwa.